People keep waiting for Bitcoin to drop 80% again, but what if I told you that's never going to happen? The 4-year cycle is dead, and here's why Bitcoin is different now. So Bitcoin in the past, of course, we've seen some huge crashes, the likes of 2021 and even prior. But this was due to a factor of reasons. First off, it was a small illiquid market, so of course it was way easier to move the price of an asset. Secondly, it was dominated by retail speculation and these miner-driven cycles. There were no large institutions to buy support on these dips, and the cycles back then were driven by halvings and shock supply with a mix of euphoria. So why won't Bitcoin crash 80% again, or any form of large crash? First, we have the institutional demand here. We have the Bitcoin ETFs, the likes of BlackRock and Fidelity. They are buying Bitcoin every single day. Also, corporate entities and companies are now buying Bitcoin. We have Michael Saylor's MicroStrategy continuing to buy every single dip and even tops of the market. There's other publicly trading companies using Bitcoin as a treasury asset. And even this week, we had Brian Armstrong, the CEO of Coinbase, saying that we are buying Bitcoin daily. Not even scratching the surface of it. We also have nations buying, the likes of El Salvador adopting Bitcoin. We have Trump's proposed Bitcoin strategic reserve, or even sovereign wealth fund, which will be holding Bitcoin as well. So with all of these buys, that means liquidity is way deeper now. There's global liquidity and integration on the TradFi rails with the likes of Fidelity and BlackRock, these huge investment companies, which gives it a structural bid. Whenever we see some huge dips, we of course will be buying at support levels, and there's continuous DCA, so dollar cost average flows from ETFs and institutions. So Bitcoin now has a smooth and consistent flow and floor of buys. But what could still crash Bitcoin? We saw, of course, when Trump announced his global tariffs, that the whole market took a bit of a beating. Bitcoin did actually crash around 25% from its high at $110,000 down to around $79,000. So I'm not saying there's never going to be crashes again, but we're not going to see these huge crashes like you used to in previous history. Even a 25% crash for Bitcoin seems quite minor, and of course that was quickly recovered. There are only, I would say, 2 real possible black swan events that could cause a huge Bitcoin crash. The first of which would be if Michael Saylor's MicroStrategy starts selling their Bitcoin assets. MicroStrategy currently own around 2.5% of all Bitcoins, which is a huge amount. And of course, if we see them selling, especially being one of the first companies pushing for the Bitcoin treasury, that would of course have a lot of fear, especially for other institutions, and you could see a large sell-off. Of course, in the long run, this would be fine, and it's actually not the best thing for one entity to have a huge supply of any asset, let alone Bitcoin. And then the true major black swan event would be if we see a transaction from Satoshi Nakamoto's wallet. Satoshi has 1 million Bitcoin, around 5% of the total supply. Again, this wallet has never moved any Bitcoin at all. Of course, people don't know who Satoshi is and if this wallet is even accessible. But if there was any move from that wallet, especially any Bitcoin sales, of course, there's going to be huge fear and expecting a pretty big crash. These 2 events, though, are very unlikely and probably the only true black swan events where we could see a large Bitcoin crash. So what does all of this mean? Of course, you will see some corrections, you'll see dips, and these are great buying opportunities. Of course, over time, the flow of Bitcoin is constantly going up. You can look at the past and look at how it's going to turn out in the future. The floor is going to keep getting higher. Of course, 1 Bitcoin as a whole was a goal for a lot of people. Very soon, that might just be 0.1 Bitcoin, and that may be inaccessible for the majority of people. So it's important to stack your Bitcoin, never sell it, and keep buying those dips because those are great opportunities to add to your stack. And YouTube think you should watch this video next. Drop a like if you enjoyed. Thanks for watching.